Mayor Pro Tem's on, Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Bryant, Commissioner Matlow. 4 of the 5 of us are on. We have a quorum. I'd like to call this workshop to order. Hey, first of all, it's great to see everybody. We're going to have a wonderful day between the budget workshop this morning and the City Commission meeting this afternoon. As always, I appreciate everyone's hard work and dedication. Before we start, the City Attorney has provided me with a legal statement to read into the record. Bear with me. On March 20th, 2020, the Governor Ron DeSantis issued Executive Order 20-69 as extended by subsequent executive orders, authorizing local governments due to the COVID-19 state of emergency to hold public meetings using communications, media technology, and without the physical presence of a quorum until the expiration of the state of emergency. The state of emergency was declared in Executive Order 20-52 and declared locally by Leon County pursuant to Leon County Proclamation 2020-6, as has been amended and extended. The Governor on June 23, 2020, extended Executive Order 20-69 until August 1st, 2020. This order may be further extended due to the changing health metrics. Additionally, the City Commission took action on April 8th, 2020 to permit the use of communication media technology until the expiration of Executive Order 20-69. Therefore, although the current City Commission workshop was initially noticed to take place in City Hall Commission chambers, the workshop was renoticed on July 2nd, 2020 due to Leon County's increasing COVID-19 positivity metrics to occur virtually with the opportunity for the public to participate through technology. Further, City Commission meetings and other city public meetings, including meetings of quasi-judicial boards and advisory committees, may continue to meet using communications media technology and without the physical presence of a quorum, as authorized by Executive Order 20-69, until its expiration or other action of this City Commission. Colleagues, any questions on the statement? I would send them to the City Attorney. Madam Attorney, have I met the legal requirement to begin this workshop?
Yes, you have, Mayor.
Excellent. Wonderful. With that, let's begin. Mr. Manager, do we have any agenda modifications for the workshop?
No, sir, we do not.
Great. Mr. Treasurer Clerk, please brief us on the citizen input on the City Commission workshop.
Okay, Mayor, thank you. Good to see everybody this morning. We received a single written comment that was distributed to each of the members of the City Commission, was also posted so that the public can see that with the agenda for this meeting. We did not receive anyone signing up to speak at this meeting. That was made available, both written comment and the opportunity to speak. Again, single written comment, which has been distributed and actually references capital projects, primarily references blueprint funds, even not specifically city funds. But with that single comment being distributed, and we've received no comments since our cutoff, so that item will be made a part of the record. And with that, that's all that I have.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any questions for the Treasurer Clerk? Moving on, we will get into the discussion and the presentation. Mr. Manager, I will turn it over to you and your team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And let me begin. I know Commissioner Matlow is working with our technology expert to join the meeting. He will be joining shortly,
Okay.
As well as other people that contribute. So I just wanted you to know that was happening as we speak. Like in prior budget discussions, our Director of Resource Management, Robert Wiggin, will lead us through this presentation, but I would like to just give a little background of what we're going to talk about today, what it means, and kind of the next steps of what to expect. So today's discussion is two-part. It is focused on our third quarter, so we are now through the first 3 quarters of fiscal year 20. As we know, fiscal year 20 has turned out to be much different than what we expected it to be with the onset of COVID-19 over the last number of months. It has been quite impactful from a budgetary point of view to the economy and frankly, I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I may have frozen for just a second. I think I'm back with you.
Mr. City Manager, if we could get everybody to mute, because we're getting some feedback while
Okay.
you're talking as well. So we can get everybody who's not speaking to mute. Thank you.
All right, good. Thank you, ma'am. And so I wanted to make sure I underscored that we will be talking about this year's budget in the third quarter, and also how we see the rest of the year playing out. Robert will repeat this, but I think it bears saying probably numerous times that we are projecting revenues to be approximately $23.4 million less than we expected at the beginning of the year. That's significant. That's across all of our enterprise funds, our general fund. It is to be expected. In this item, we are asking you to make some adjustments to our budget that include an acknowledged reduction of revenues, acknowledging also some potential grant funds, some relief funds that can help offset where we are, and acknowledge also that we are working to reduce operating expenditures to end the year with a balanced budget. We see a similar strategy for fiscal year 21. This workshop will be informative to staff as we work to prepare a proposed budget that'll be presented at your August 19th meeting, a specially called workshop to make sure that you are well engaged, that the community is well informed as we head into the final budget approval process in September that requires 2 meetings. And so that's the basis of today's discussion. Robert, I may have buffered again, I apologize. Robert, again, we'll repeat all of these, but I wanted to make sure I framed the discussion appropriately. We're going to ask you to accept this third quarter update. We're going to ask you to make third quarter amendments. We've been doing that along as we need to make adjustments. I've described some of those already, as well as approve the proposed property tax rate, otherwise known as the millage rate, and to hold it steady. We've talked about this in your prior budget discussions. The millage rate is 4.1 mils. That is, in fact, the lowest millage rate of the 25 most populous cities in the state of Florida. It has been consistently low. The city relies upon a diverse mix of revenues, one of which is property tax, but there's a number of revenues that the city relies upon. And so even though we do recognize that revenues will be less than we expected this year and next year, with your direction and leadership, we are working to make sure the property taxes millage rate stays where it is. And so that's today's discussion. I think the presentation may be about 35 or 45 minutes long. And of course, Robert will walk us through it. And I think it'll be packed with discussion throughout. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to provide that overview. And with your indulgence, I'll turn it over to Robert.
Thank you, City Manager. I'll preface my comments by saying that I moved to City Hall to make sure that I didn't get caught in a storm this morning and connectivity issues, and I've come here and there's construction going on next door. So I hear some banging and sawing. I'll forge on if you'll forge on with me. So I appreciate that. If it gets too loud, Wayne is probably the next closest person who's more than 20 feet away from me who could probably ask them to take a break. So again, thanks for your patience. Morning, commissioners, mayor, appointed officials, member of the community who are watching online. I do appreciate your time to provide an update on the fiscal year 20 and 21 budget status. There's 3 main areas that I'd like to address, and I'm going to share a presentation to walk through those areas. I'll assume, unless I hear otherwise, that everything is showing on my screen. We're navigating COVID-19 impacts, at the same time ensuring that we're the national leader in public services. And it's been a Herculean effort by the departments and the community itself. The 3 areas that I want to walk through, as Reese mentioned, we want to give an update on the third quarter. Since we met in April, we have results from March, April, May, and preliminary results from June. So we feel much more confident in our estimates and our impacts. And then we know that with July, August, and September, that they'll hold some change possibly, but we've gone through and estimated where we think we'll be by the end of the fiscal year for our closeout of the fiscal year. Another area that I'd like to walk through is our, in our efforts to accomplish efficient and effective operations and a year-end balanced budget. The city manager mentioned some budget amendments that we'll ask you to undertake. Those are some procedural ones, making sure that we could reopen the Jake Gaither Golf Course, making sure that we could, that we're doing the stormwater work that needs to be done at this time, as well as then revenue and expense actions for the general fund, for aviation, and for Star Metro as funds that are most affected by the COVID impacts. And lastly, based on these developments in the third quarter and these amendments, I'd like to walk through a set of assumptions for our fiscal year 21 budget development. Those assumptions have changed, obviously, since we talked in April. And one of those assumptions that hasn't changed is we'll ask you to take a vote to affirm the property tax rate of 4.1 mils, as well as the Downtown Improvement Authority dedicated millage rate. We'll offer some operating budget guidance for fiscal year 21, and then also ask for guidance on the capital improvement program for fiscal year 21 through 25. Mayor and Commissioners, as you well know, since March, the Commission has directed a number of social, economic, health, and welfare responses to community needs. Those needs have resulted in nearly $18 million in pandemic actions, early and often actions. These are responsibilities that are above and beyond our normal operations of providing reliable and effective utility services, transporting people to their jobs and throughout the community for recreation, ensuring that the public is safe and has a platform to come together and or socially distance, as we're now dealing with. These items are all familiar to you. We approved suspended disconnects and provided utility bill deferment. The COVID Economic Development Program was established, benefiting 561 local businesses with $1.1 million in direct aid to ensure that they could immediately continue rent or labor or supplies to transition during this COVID period of the pandemic. Utility bill relief was approved in April and has resulted in May in a 27% electric bill reduction, nearly $6.3 million in utility rate savings. We've got a fire services fee that we had planned to work towards implementing in fiscal year 21. And what we've decided is that we can forego that rate change and do the implementation in fiscal year 22 while maintaining it as a critical public safety service. The LEAN program was established to authorize up to $1 million in grants to local nonprofits, again, in partnership with Leon County and our Office of Economic Vitality. And then most recently, $250,000 in small business grants are targeted for the Greater Frenchtown and Southside CRA District. These are all early actions that we've taken and have been very visible in the community. I'd like to mention a few others that departments continue to maintain their critical operations as the national leader in the delivery of public services. Those efforts that they've undertaken to protect the community has resulted in nearly $9 million in protective activities and also some nationally recognized provision of services. And if you'll bear with me, I'd like to walk through some of those just from a list that I have here. Foremost, the city's taken steps to ensure health, safety, and welfare of the staff and community. Citywide, we've distributed over 10,000 masks to citizens while practicing social distancing. Human resources, technology and innovation, and facilities have ensured employee safety during the pandemic by implementing guidelines to facilitate telework, screening employees, acquiring and distributing personal protective equipment, And then a lot of credit to all of the departments to share employees across departments as work from home and assigned jobs changed. Another health, safety, and welfare early response was in Star Metro, who rapidly designed and installed plexiglass partitions on buses. We've had several other municipal transit agencies contact us to get insight in how to install these devices and ensure that transport to jobs and maintaining the economy was well established. As that leader across the state, Star Metro has also then informed our utility services, our revenue services areas, so that they can now interact with customers as we go through the soft reopening. It's not just the virus that we've had to consider. Personal protection is very important, but we've also had to recognize that we entered hurricane season during all of this. And with great credit to our resiliency office, our city managers, Leon County, Elder Care Services, Ability First, ARP, and the Red Cross, we distributed hurricane preparedness buckets, doing it socially distanced to the community's most vulnerable citizens. We also conducted neighborhood preparedness reviews online, which was a critical element of were we to weather a storm, so to speak. Your neighbors are the most important lifeline that you have, and so ensuring that everybody's aware and considerate of what is happening in your neighborhood is important. So another critical element for health, safety, and welfare at the same time as a pandemic. Resilience for the community is important. We've established an office just to focus on that. As part of their efforts, Housing and Human Services has established a homeless task force, GIS dashboard. Is recognized as a national best practice for real-time multi-agency emergency sheltering coordination. They worked in partnership then with the Kearney Center, Big Bend 211, Leon County, and established congregate living options for our homeless population. Star Metro provided free rides to the public from fixed route and dial-a-ride services to COVID-19 testing sites at Florida A&M University Bragg Memorial Stadium. Again, a Herculean effort that's very impressive and has been a lifeline for our community. Star Metro went even further in continuing their Stuff the Bus campaign, gathering 33,000 pounds of food to help some of the community's neediest during this time. Not just in health, safety, and welfare with personal protection, resilience for the community, but then normal operations need to continue. Our economy is very important, and maintaining that connection between what we support and what services we provide is critical. And I'll mention a few of those actions that have been taken by the departments. Building inspections implemented a virtual inspection program so that they could continue mechanical changeouts, gas inspections, window inspections, door inspections, and that ensures that employees and customers are safe and that the economy keeps building, the building economy keeps moving forward. A combination of building inspection, growth management, and planning have converted to 100% electronic submittals and virtual meetings. Another very, very impressive transition to stand that up in the middle of the pandemic as we're moving home to shelter in place and go virtual at the same time. You're well aware of our utility customer service support, maintaining its utility and citywide call center services throughout the COVID response, proactively calling night and weekends participants to see if they want to move back to a regular rate now that their lifestyle has changed, implementing the no cutoff for non-utility payment processing, and also then crediting bills in May for the utility bill relief program. I can't say enough about then each call center representative working so closely with businesses and residential customers to give them comfort about where they're going to be in this economy with bill payment and how they can defer some of that payment and or spread those payments over time. Great credit again to human resources and technology innovation for ramping up virtual training, community services, also stepped in to develop the first ever e-learning program for our 107 summer youth program workers. The TFLA program participants are working in a distance learning environment, learning financial skills, resume building, interview skills, and again, really stepping up to participate in this program. Some of the operational areas that I'd like to mention, community beautification and solid waste, TPD, the fire department have all moved from a in-person command structure to a decentralized command structure to ensure that the spread of COVID is reduced. I'm proud to mention that they have experienced uninterrupted services in this 3 or 4 month period. And if those jobs aren't challenging enough, wearing a mask, ensuring social distancing, being considerate of what the impacts of COVID are, as in my case, my solid waste services have probably increased, and I appreciate all the pickups that have never stopped during this time. Our electric utility, you're well aware, utilized a modified sequester and place schedule that was first developed for hurricane response and then repurposed for COVID response. It received national recognition in April on ABC News. It quickly developed a staffing plan to ensure that critical elements of the electric utility wouldn't be affected by any virus impacts. It included 1 week on, 1 week off schedules, and of course, electric leading the way in that is only mirrored by those other departments that did much of the same effort. Underground utilities, police department, fire department, they've all ensured that their employees are safe, but also then able to respond when called upon. Our Parks and Rec, again, thank you for allowing me to continue, but with this list, but Parks and Recreation is our quality of life. It's our contact with a number of important citizen groups. They've re-examined their approaches to delivering services and looked at best practices across the nation, and then developed their best practices themselves for social distancing, the use of technology, and most importantly, keeping participants engaged. Our recreational and senior centers are so important to the vitality of our community, and they created new activities to ensure that there was connectivity there. Senior Center, beginning in March, physically closed its doors, but it's reopened through a transition based on delivering remote services so that even seniors who may be home alone don't feel alone. 4,000 phone calls and 10,000 emails were proactively sent to seniors. 4,500 Facebook Live followers have been established in this time. We created a Parks and Recreation and Neighborhood Services, and the Senior Center created a YouTube channel along with WCOT and Facebook Live. They're broadcasting to over 50 different classes that cover fitness, arts, crafts, and lifelong learning. It just keeps getting better. The Upslide Friends Connection Group, it's a program that's specifically established for people who feel lonely and isolated. It's been funded by the Florida Blue Foundation. It received the Program of Excellence Award for the best health and wellness program at the National Senior Center Conference in June, again, during our experience with the virus. And again, probably most importantly of this list is there's an upcoming annual ice cream social, which will be a virtual event on July 13th at 12:30 p.m. And so again, everybody make sure you've got some ice cream in the freezer for that event. The next area I can't ignore are recreation centers, Palmer Monroe, Lafayette, Sue McCollum locations. They also reopened to offer their services in a reimagined approach. The connected activities that they offered were science, reading, cooking, and just fun virtual games, challenges, and do-it-yourself projects. Exercise at home, staying active, arts and crafts, nature, art, and gardening classes have all been offered. Photo galleries, dress-up events, sports skills training at home, and even the joke of the day are all shared virtually now, again, to ensure that we have that connectivity and strong quality of life. Athletics have continued. Training and tip videos for a variety of activities have been established. Fishing, basketball, tennis, pickleball, and gymnastics are all online to improve skills. And then other virtual offerings for individual warm-ups and exercises that we can do every day. Conditioning, stretching, and doing exercises from home is very important and critical at this time. Again, very impressive connectivity numbers. The social media engagements with our recreation athletic connections are increasing. They're up to 122% through public shares, likes, comments, clicks to open pictures and videos. Social media impressions are up 33.5%. And these are the number of times that social media browsers have been exposed to our content. Again, an impressive number. And their overall net audience growth has been 20%, maintaining that and reestablishing that connectivity. So I mentioned some of the personal protection, the resiliency, the operational changes. There are just other few highlights that I'd like to mention. In grants and fire and fleet and facilities, they've answered and applied for 17 grants at the state and federal level, valued at almost $10 million, over $10 million. And again, doing that virtually is no easy feat. So it's a very impressive work coordinated by our grants office. Our resource management office was able to participate in a global initiative to assist with COVID-19 impact. We developed a model to track expenses for FEMA reimbursement and shared it with over 60 participants from across the globe. That global hackathon was focused just on that activity. We were able to participate in that event. There's some recognition we've received. I mentioned a couple of senior center and our TFLA program recognition, but also our community service has been able to recognize 34th youth from the ages of 16 to 24 with the largest graduating class ever in Tempo's history. That June graduating class also marked the achievement of a milestone for the program's 1,000 participants. Again, a great credit to Dr. Thomas and his staff. One other area that we were able to answer questions about and respond to, I'll ask Jim to speak to this because he's got the best knowledge of this and was the impetus behind this, but we're doing some refinancing now. We managed to secure a AA bond rating at this time from our rating agencies. And if I could pause, I'd like to ask Jim to give us some details of that, because, and again, a very impressive accomplishment during this time.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate the opportunity. Mayor and Commissioners, as you know, you approved a few months ago moving forward with a couple of bond issues. We have worked remotely and through the pandemic with our advisors and all the parties, a number of our departments involved, just like much of what Robert was describing, a lot of collaboration across departments, the utilities who will be issuing the bonds, managing their programs, our office coordinating the debt issuance, support from resource management and accounting, just a variety of people. But we will next week on July the 14th sell bonds for our energy system, which is technically our electric and gas utilities, although at this point our gas utility is largely cash funded on a pay-as-you-go basis, so that the debt portion is primarily electric. But in connection with that, we have already gone through the process of presenting information to the rating agencies, and Moody's has given us a AA3 rating, Standard & Poor's a AA rating. So both of those, as Robert mentioned, in the AA category, we're very proud of that. Both of those are stable. Rating agencies, when they are looking at an entity, they may provide a rating, but identify some things that cause them concern and maybe put them on a negative outlook or negative watch because of some uncertainties. That's not the case with us here. We're stable in that AA category. Our strengths are things like our debt service coverage. often when I'm talking about bonds, I use a home mortgage comparison. Somebody looked at us and said, based on your income and based on what it costs you to live, you've got enough money at the end of the month to pay your mortgage. We've got appropriate net revenues to cover our debt service, and so that's a strength, as is our liquidity. We have made sure that we have reserves and funding for capital improvements on a cash basis, so that having those pieces strengthens our position. And then one of our strengths, a decision made a long time ago with our rates, is that we have a CPI, cost of living adjustment, so that we're able to maintain competitive rates, but also have them set appropriately. So that's the energy system. That's on the 14th. The next day, July the 15th, we will sell bonds for our consolidated utility systems, and that's our water, sewer, and stormwater. As with the energy, these are refunding. So we're refinancing some outstanding debt. We're not adding to our debt burden. We are going to be able to enjoy over the next 6 to 8 years a reduced debt service level. Again, using the home mortgage example, we're refinancing while rates are low. And that's working out well with us. And with strong ratings, we expect things to go really well next week. On the consolidated utility system side, a very similar story. We have good liquidity. Our cash position is good. We have debt service coverage is strong. And again, our rates are competitive and are adjusted appropriately over time. So in both cases, I think this is an example, as with some of the other things that have been mentioned, where a third party, someone independently, has looked at the city's operations, in this case, particularly our utilities, and given us strong ratings, affirming really a history for us of being in a good position to enjoy that. And then we're excited about the fact that though there was some volatility a couple of months ago in the marketplace, that seems to have settled down, and rates really are at very low positions. And so we're looking forward to taking advantage of that next week, and I very much appreciate all the hard work of the utilities on an ongoing basis, managing their systems, but then also our other city departments working with us as we look forward to next week.
Thank you for that, Jim. Good bond ratings are great headlines, but as Jim mentioned, a real bottom line is that there are real savings on an annual basis. So the ability to refinance, to take advantage of lower rates, to borrow at a lower rate means that for the foreseeable future, we'll be able to have real savings in our budget. I'm sure that I was only able to very briefly skim over some of the notable accomplishments of staff and management of the city. I did that because when I look at numbers, I don't think those numbers represent very well the effort, the sweat, the pivoting and the change that took place within this organization. I'll clinically bring this down to what the impacts are of revenue loss and expenditure impacts. But I did want to take the opportunity to recognize that the departments, your leadership, the management of the organization, and most importantly, the staff who changed not only where they worked, but then how they worked. And so thank you for letting me do that. Resources are important. We start when we talk about resources by looking at revenues. In fiscal year 20, when we met in April, we talked about a nearly $30 to $50 million loss of revenue impact. What we've recognized as we've gotten more data in March and April and in May and June is that impact is mitigated by some other factors. And so we've been able to now estimate through the end of the fiscal year where we think our status is. I've got a chart that's shown here, and on the left-hand side of the chart are our 14 operating funds, from the general fund to fire services to electric to aviation to down to the cemetery. Our fiscal year 21 budget totaled $723.2 million. That does not include the $160 million in capital spending that each of these departments undertakes also. Recall that the general fund, $161.4 million, represents our public infrastructure, our Parks and Recreation Department, our Housing and Human Services, our public safety areas, and then also transfers to support our consolidated dispatch area, Star Metro Transit. That budget has been impacted by revenues. In the third column over, we've identified what those revenue impacts are, and the city manager referenced this when he did his introduction. Looking at a $30 to $50 million impact, we don't see very much change within that impact in the general fund. Sales tax, state revenue sharing, gas tax revenues are still being impacted and are pretty consistent with what our original estimates showed. We have seen some relief in our electric, gas, water, and sewer areas. I think our large customers, we probably looked at what estimates of impact they would have and have not seen as that great of an impact in their operations, and therefore then also our shift to more of a residential model has improved those forecasts or those revenue impacts. Aviation, there's no doubt 95% passenger loss is impacting their operations. Star Metro is in a similar situation as where we reported in April with a $7.2 million impact in revenues. The FSU contract, the cash box revenues, fare box revenues, gas tax and sales tax also impact Star Metro. Overall, as mentioned earlier, we're looking at about a $23.3 million revenue impact in fiscal year 20, and we'll take some actions to reflect and amend our budget to reduce what we forecasted or budgeted for our revenues. Along with those revenue impacts, we've been able to target where there are expenditure changes. We knew at that time that travel and special events and some large contracts would change as a result of our response to the pandemic. And that total resulting impact is about $8.9 million, of which in the general fund, and I can't see I see everybody, but I'm not seeing that column. So that impact in the general fund is about $5.1 million. Again, great credit to managing expenditures closely, where there's not the need to spend for travel or special events or certain temporary wages for program openings, repurposing those personnel to do the additional work that we've done online. And in light of that, being able to reduce expenditures in the general fund by $5 million. The net impact of those revenue and expenditure changes of $23.3 million and $8.9 million in expenditures is a net impact to these funds of $14.4 million overall. I'll point out a couple critical ones that show the greatest negative amount. The general fund, the revenue loss that we're seeing will be offset by some expenditures. In looking at then at the end of the year, we are forecasting a $1.6 million deficit to finish the year. What we're seeing is there's no absolute recurring revenue to identify at this time to close that gap. Our options for closing that gap include some one-time revenues, and CARES Act is one of those areas. We just have been in conversations in discussion with the county. They released their budget proposal to their commissioner, and we'll be talking on the 14th about a plan for the COVID relief monies that they've received from the state of Florida, about $52 million of which they're looking at rental and mortgage assistance programs, local personal protective equipment response, some testing and case management, but also as part of that $52 million, they've set aside $12 million to allow the city and county to recoup some of the expenditures that they've put into this COVID response. That $5 million of the $12 million for the city, some of that will come back to the general fund, and we'll reconcile that in July and August and September as we look at what we have expended what can be recovered from FEMA, what are some of our matching obligations are, and then how we balance all that within some of the grants we've received in specific areas, and then through the Leon County plan. I'll drop down to aviation. We're showing a deficit at year end. They are in the process of evaluating how their CARES Act monies can be used. And so we expect that we'll be able to close some of that gap with those CARES Act monies, but it's really too early not to project a deficit for the aviation fund as a standalone fund. Star Metro also showing a deficit just because of our commitment to maintain employment where we are, maintain services, make sure those services are provided safely. We do expect to see a deficit going into the year end. Again, the Federal Transportation Administration has identified CARES Act for each community, and the City of Tallahassee is one of those designees. We have received an award letter, and we're going through the process of understanding what that award letter means. Our initial understanding is that it can offset lost revenues, and so we would be able to expect to plug in some of that CARES Act money into Star Metro to balance that budget at year end. Our utilities, our building inspection, our fire department, as enterprise funds, are using sound management practices, and in each case, typically have a fund balance to end the fiscal year and/or reserves. So as a one-time non-recurring revenue source, we'll look to use those in this time of emergency as we have established those funds by policy. Lastly, and very importantly for quality of life and some semblance of returning to normal, the Gulf Fund has been most affected by the closure, and we will look at what summer new participation rates are like and be able to estimate what the final revenues are, and then close that gap either with the transfer from the general fund or there's some small reserves that they've established to do repairs and maintenance at the facility. So in a nutshell, that's our overall view of the fiscal year 20 budget. It's again, it's not a good representation of the work that I described earlier that everyone's been doing, but it is a good representation of the effort of the good management, sound management, responsible spending, early identification of opportunities and applying for grants and getting awards from the federal and state, and now working with Leon County to help us close that gap with CARES Act funding.
Robert, thank you for that wonderful presentation.
Sure. I've got fiscal year 20 is then informing us where we go in fiscal year 21. I've got 2 slides that show the fiscal year 21 budget assumptions that I'd like to walk through, and then also walk through the TRIM property tax approval process, and then talk about next steps. Again, thanks for your patience in watching online. On this page, I've got 8 items. These represent our revenues for the general fund and the labor that is the engine of our government. And so therefore, they're very important assumptions. I'd like to identify those that have not changed and those that have changed as a result of where we see ourselves in fiscal year 20, and then where we can expect to see ourselves in fiscal year 21. As you well know, the property tax rate that we'll be voting on today to advertise will remain at 4.1 mils. It's consistent with the past 4 years, and that's consistent where we were as we started this fiscal year and forecast into fiscal year 21. We've made sure that in the second box that we communicate that we have a commitment to maintain fill positions. Other communities have looked at furloughs. They've looked at requiring time off. They've cut positions. We don't believe that for the effects of COVID that is and we're fortunate in that that's not the direction that we need to take. We want to maintain those fill positions to keep service level high, to maintain our dedication to the community, and then departments themselves will actively manage those vacancies that they do have to either hire where needed or transition those vacancies to other places. But it ultimately will then ensure a high level of service delivery. And so I did see one report that said we had a hiring freeze, and that's not accurate. That's not where we are now for this fiscal year 21 look forward. The next issue is very difficult because we are projecting a deficit in fiscal year 20, and in fiscal year 21, we're projecting a lack of sufficient recurring revenue for employee raises. We had talked about a 3% raise across the board for all general government employees, and then meeting collective bargaining agreements as they were negotiated. At this time, with a $1.6 million deficit projected in fiscal year 20, nearly a $7 million deficit that we're projecting in fiscal year 21, we don't feel it's responsible to recommend or to budget for a raise without recurring revenues. I mentioned collective bargaining. Those negotiations are ongoing with fire and police, and whatever those results are, we'll incorporate them into the budget. When we talk about salaries, it also means positions. We know that we're having a discussion this afternoon on an inspector general proposal, and that function will add 2 FTEs. And so we will acknowledge that and recognize that in the budget in 21. Otherwise, as I mentioned earlier, any FTEs that are in the budget will remain the same and be reflected or repurposed depending upon the needs of each of the departments to provide its high level of service. These next 2 boxes, healthcare costs and pension costs, are consistent with where we estimated the budget would be in April. We're still looking at a 4.5% increase in healthcare costs, and we'll maintain the cost sharing arrangement that we have in place for what the city pays and what an employee pays, with a 70-30 split with that healthcare cost increase. And then pension costs are based on an actuarial review, and we'll budget the full cost of that to maintain that fund. But we don't foresee and don't expect and don't have any increases for employees as a result of the pension actuarial report. One other area that we're identifying and acknowledging is that we know that public safety is very important, whether it's law enforcement or community services. They work hand in hand. We also know that police recruiting is a challenge. We've been working through that for the last 4 years by adding positions, by acquiring COPS grants. But we also know that just having the position is the first step. The second step is then hiring quality employees that meet high standards of law enforcement. And we know that we have a number of vacancies and retirements that are occurring in fiscal year 21. So to that end, we acknowledge that as we go into the budget, that we'll need to increase overtime funding to reflect support for the current staff that we have on hand. We're also acknowledging and proposing that $250,000 be dedicated excuse me, for Chief Rebel to undertake some new recruiting efforts. He's got some brand new great ideas, and we want to make sure that there's money behind those efforts. This next set of assumptions that I've displayed here, represent a variety of known approaches to revenue, operating, capital, human service, our financial policy requirements, and then also speak to our fiscal year 21 estimated position. Excuse me. We do expect that operating costs will be held at fiscal year 20 levels, except for enterprise funds, where we do have built-in CPI, consumer price index increases for materials and supplies. That estimate was originally 1.9%. It's now at 1.5% as a result of what we've experienced these past few months. I'll mention that the fire fee adjustments we're planned for fiscal year 21 will be delayed until fiscal year 22. I do expect that we'll bring back resolutions to that effect in September, so that we are ensuring that that important public safety budget is in place in fiscal year 22. Just a reminder that we took action probably earlier this year in January to ensure that we maintain our commitment to solid waste recycling. That study is still underway, and we expect the results of that to be back in September. We put the fees in place in order to ensure that we had a path forward for multiple years, and we'll have the recommendations from the experts in the solid waste recycling environment to bring back at that time. Our financing the government policy speaks to fair recovery of costs for those services that aren't of a benefit to all members of the community. So we do expect that we'll have some fee schedule adjustments for growth management, parks and recreation, and parking, and that ensures that the cost and benefits are paid by the users of those services. And we'll identify and disclose those changes in the fiscal year 21 budget proposed numbers in August. The next 3 slides, 2 slides speak to our capital program. Our infrastructure maintenance and construction plans will need to be reevaluated based on Blueprint 2020 and CRA commitments. Those have been recently updated. I think an update will be provided tomorrow for Blueprint, and the CRA recently took action, and so we'll make adjustments in those areas. But we also know that our entire capital program is impacted by gas and sales tax sources. We'll reevaluate what requests there are, identify what amount of progress we've made with projects. If any projects have continued, then it gives us an ability to extend the life cycle of when we budget for these projects. With the treasurer clerk's assistance and accounting assistance, we'll look at these cash flows. We'll look at timing and scheduling of debt service payments. And that will be a one-time effort that we can use to close a gap in fiscal year 21. Most important to us are our housing and human service areas. One aspect of that housing and human service program is our CHSP process. That renewal of 2-year funding cycle is in process. Again, going online and virtual in this last 3 or 4 months. We expect that we'll be able to hold the line on those 2 years of funding. So we'll be funding 2021 and 2022 based on the recommendations that are coming from the citizens that staff those committees. And we expect that we'll maintain the funding levels at fiscal year 21 at fiscal year 21 amounts. We did implement and award an additional $50,000 in bridge loans to those entities that applied and are typically not able to qualify for CHSP. Our expectation is they're now on that path to move into CHSP and have the funding in fiscal year 21, and then in fiscal year 21 to then enter into the citizens review through the CHSP process. So again, great credit to Housing and Human Services, Community Affairs, Resource Management, who all work together to award those funds during these last 3 months. I mentioned the policy targets for deficiencies fund because reserves are so important. We establish policies for emergencies just like this. We do know that based on the last 3 hurricanes, our deficiencies fund still has some outstanding payments that are due from FEMA. We're actively working on those, but it's our intent to maintain or restore those deficiencies fund targets and reserve amounts in the 21 budget. Ideally, we will do that through the federal and state programs that are available to us to respond to COVID. The last 2 slides are probably the most important as we look forward to fiscal year 21. We know that the budget for sales tax, for gas tax, for state revenue sharing is very soft. Our initial estimates showed a 50% reduction for a 3-month period with a 25% reduction that carried over. We were optimistic at that time that at year end, that would turn around with the reopening. We don't expect that to rebound. We do expect the effects on those gas tax, sales tax numbers to continue into fiscal year 21. That is why we're projecting a revenue shortfall in fiscal year 21 for the general fund of $7 million. How we respond to that is entirely dependent upon where we see ourselves in the next 3 months. The first quarter of fiscal year 21 will also be telling what we're able to do because of sound policy, of sound practices, of good management, is undertake one-time efforts to address that. We don't believe, looking at the economy, that we're in a situation where we have to look at long-term changes, which would mean changing programs or changing service levels or changing funding sources. What we do think is that there are one-time non-recurring actions that we can take. We funded our fleet in a responsible manner. We've funded our repair and maintenance projects in a responsible manner over these last 5 years. We've maintained our capital improvement and infrastructure investment at a responsible level. There are one-time actions that we can take in each of those areas to reduce revenue requirements in fiscal year, expenditure requirements in fiscal year 21. That combined with the reserves that we've maintained, and then any CARES Act funding that we can carry over into fiscal year 21. Again, we think we can close that gap with those non-recurring one-time actions. With that overview of fiscal year 20, with that set of assumptions for fiscal year 21 that we want to bring back in August as a proposed budget, we also then want to walk through some amendments. Part of those amendments includes the acceptance of public safety grants, awards from the CARES Act through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, some crime statistics exchange grants and justice assistance grants. That means that additional revenue sources available to support TPD operations in fiscal year 20. We are also asking to authorize the appropriation of $69,000 in additional SHIP funding. We brought agendas with the initial release of CARES Act funding in April, and there's an additional amount that's available to us, and we want to appropriate that for rent, mortgage, utility payment assistance programs that we're working closely with the county to implement with their CARES Act funding. One important emergency that we responded to was we could reopen Hylaman Golf Course and Jake Gaither Golf Course. But with the time off, we needed a pump replacement to ensure that we could continue the maintenance of the facility. And so we made the short-term decision to identify monies from undesignated fund balance in their general government. These are amounts that are left over when projects are closed and we come in under budget. And then we also identified a new bike box project that had some capacity available from fiscal year 17 to also apply. And so we're asking for an amendment to that for those projects. Another very important action that we're asking you to take is to authorize a supplemental appropriation for the stormwater water quality program. This $1.5 million from Blueprint 2020 will allow us to continue to address water pollution. The city has a consent order that it is working to close out by fiscal year 22. We expected to close it out in fiscal year, in January of this year, when some additional repairs came to our attention. And so this addresses those repairs and puts us back on the path to close out that consent order. And all of these repairs are consistent with best management practices for stormwater and water quality requirements. The last area, and this is recognizing that the revenue impacts that we have, the revenue losses that we have, we're confident in how those change the budget. We want to recognize those amounts now so that we end the year with a balanced budget. will then also reflect some of the revenue losses are $17.7 million in change. We're also reflecting changes in expenditures across the organization of $6.4 million, and then also recognizing $11.3 million in CARES Act grant relief. The second to last slide that I'd like to walk through is statutory requirements require that we approve to affirm the property tax rate for the City of Tallahassee at 4.1 mils is what our recommendation is. We also at the same time affirm the Downtown Improvement Authority millage rate at 1.0 mils. The latter, the Downtown Improvement Authority, was a voted upon dedicated millage that goes to those downtown businesses for their activities, paid for by those downtown businesses. This step that we go through is procedural. It lets the Leon County property appraiser start the advertising process, notifies the tax collector, and then notifies State Department of Revenue prior to adoption as required by statute. Both of those rates will then be reflected on trim notices along with county tax rates and school board tax rates and special district tax rates with the trim notice that's sent to each property owner in late August to provide a date, time, and location. They notice what the rates are, what the impact is to a household, and then the date, time, and location of the required public hearing on the budget. We're also recommending that we affirm those two dates, September 9th and September 23rd, as the first and final public budget hearing to adopt the fiscal year 21 budget. With that, I'll ask for any guidance, any comments, any feedback, any questions. We are asking the commission to select option 1 to accept the fiscal year 20 third quarter update, to approve requested budget amendments, authorizations, and grant awards, provide any additional direction for fiscal year 21 and 21 through 25 capital budgets, and then approve the following trim requirements with the meeting dates and the millage rate for the city and the Downtown Improvement Authority. Again, thank you for your time. I'll stop sharing my screen, but I can bring that back up at any time if anyone has any questions about a specific slide or number or recommendation.
Robert, thank you so much for that great presentation. And I apologize when you took that long paused breath earlier. I thought that you had wrapped up. I didn't realize we had 2 more to go. I do apologize. Mr. City Manager, do you have any other final comments as well on top of Robert's great presentation before we go into commission discussion?
No, sir. We certainly welcome your feedback on the material. Robert did a great job. I think there's a lot of material there, and we look forward to your feedback.
Excellent. Before I open it up, I'm glad I had a couple of cups of coffee in me before that wonderful presentation on the deficit that we're looking at moving forward. Because, hey, these are interesting times that we're in. No doubt about it. 100-year global pandemic. It's impacted us tremendously. I want you to know how much I appreciate your hard work, Mr. City Manager, and your team to keep, municipal services up and running. And while we're facing this incredible deficit. So let's go ahead and open it up. Everybody, we've got plenty of time for discussion or questions. And to be easy, I'm just going to go down the line. I'll start with the Mayor Pro Tem and then go to Commissioner Bryant, Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Matlow. I'll provide some comment. We can entertain a motion and we can go from there. So Mayor Pro Tem, let me turn it over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me just say, Robert, you need a big swig of water. This was a lot of heavy lifting, and hats off to the city manager, the deputy city manager, the assistant city managers, and everybody who played a role, all the way down to our general employees, because this has impacted everyone, and at some level or another. And to see it come out in dollars and cents, while it looks like it may not look like we want it to look, but at least we've had people who've been minding, as we say from Quincy, somebody's been minding the hen house. And so we know how many eggs we need to be able to balance this budget by the end of the year. And fortunately, we've identified some additional hens from the federal level to lay some golden eggs to help us cover some of this and close this gap a little bit. I am very impressed at how Robert, you all laid this out. Raul, I know you. Yeah, I can't see you, but I know you out there somewhere. The way you all laid this out, so it would be easy to follow. There you are, easy to follow and to understand. I don't count pennies. I'm not an accountant. I have friends who are, and we call them bean counters. And I'm glad that you all are counting our beans, you're counting our eggs, and trying to keep this going. The most important thing to me, from what I heard, is the fact that we're making sure that we continue to provide the services that our residents need. And we're also continuing to maintain the current workforce that we have. That is not happening in other communities. And I applaud this group for looking at what we can do to keep everybody working. Now, I know they all deserve a raise. They all deserve a raise, no doubt. But before we can get the raise, we got to keep the job. So I'm hoping that things get better. But if they don't, the worst thing that could happen is that we will continue to work at a high professional and high performing level without a potential raise. But even in that, healthcare, the cost of healthcare is the increase in the cost of healthcare is being covered. And that, to me, is worth more than a raise, because you got to have insurance got to have insurance, period. But during this pandemic, it is real important to have insurance and also retirement and those kinds of things. So I applaud you. Just one correction. Robert, you say we gave out 10,000 masks. We actually gave out 25,000. That's how I know, because I field a lot of those requests because I put it out there. And so people are still asking us for masks. So we're glad that the county has joined us in the mask giveaway and have actually taken the mantle and are running with it. Let me just say again, I hope that the listening public is aware of the work that goes into running this city. What's the overall budget amount, the amount of money that goes through the city?
Just under $1 billion between operating and capital.
Okay, so we're talking about $1 billion to maintain services and take care somewhere around almost 200,000 people. So thank you all for what you're doing. I look forward to what my fellow commissioners and the mayor has to say about that. But I thought it was going to be worse, but thank God it's not. And this is where we are. We got 3 more months to balance this thing. I think the public needs to remember, we have to balance. We have to have a balanced budget. And so this is where we are with 3 months to go. Hopefully things will turn around. If not, we'll do the best we can. I know some people who can bake good cakes and brownies and cookies, and we have to have a bake sale, and that's what we'll do to make sure we balance our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bryant.
Look, don't have me come after Diane anymore, Commissioner Williams-Cox. I don't have any Quincy stories. I'm lost. But let me add on to the fact, all of the congratulations to staff, to Robert. Robert was going through the presentation, and I had my notebook open, and I was continuing to try and keep up because I have all of these highlights throughout. But his presentation was so good, I couldn't keep up. Robert, I want that upfront part that you provided with all of the things that we have done. I didn't see that really in my notebook, but I'm sure it's there distributed out over many pages, but you had it all condensed. So please send that to me. That was a great job, really kind of condensing all of the things we have done since COVID-19 as we struggle really to ensure, and I'm sure you'll do it, that our budget is balanced at the end of this fiscal year. I'm glad to see that on the personnel side that we are attempting to Well, now we're not going to attempt that. We're going to maintain staffing, but also as we look toward the upcoming year, that vacancies, and I'm looking over at my notebook, that, in fact, yeah, you might just kind of update me a little bit on temp services, temporary wages, and how we're going to handle that with people that actually come in for a designated period of time. It's over on page 8 in my notebook, but could you update us on that? I had that kind of highlighted.
I think it's consistent with our full-time staff. Any temporary employees that we have will maintain the commitment to keep them and keep them employed. You know, if there are program changes, then we've been able to use those employees in other ways. And so if an employee is currently employed, we'll make that commitment to keep them working and delivering the high level of service that we have.
Very good.
That's the best way to describe it.
Okay, very good. I wanted to make sure that even though we talk about our regular FTEs, that temp services people also know that we're committed to them also. Yes, sir, Reese.
Commissioner, if you don't mind, if I could add on to that answer, I think I really appreciate you asking that question, because that was something that we were very intentional about. And we've talked to you guys, the mayor commissioners, about this, of making sure that the workforce is complete. We're not just talking about FTEs, but we have individuals in OPS positions and temporary positions. And we've found new needs. Things have changed, and you have interacted with some of the individuals doing new and different things. We have a full screening process now for employees as they come to city facilities to be screened to make sure, check temperatures and go through a questioning process. And many of those individuals that you've interacted with, and you probably have talked to them and asked them where they worked otherwise, might have been doing Parks and Recreation services this summer. And so we've been able to take the entire workforce, and and the reason I wanted to answer this question is because the employees have been so flexible to do different things. You know, they may have signed up to do one thing and they totally turned out to be something different, and they have been excellent at it and productive, and we've been able to find ways to move forward. And so sorry I interrupted. I wanted to answer that, and I appreciate you asking that question, because that's been a key part of our plan.
Very good. And I'm glad to hear that. And I know they are too. The other thing is, I know we're putting a cap on actually hiring employees, at least to the degree that from where we see ourselves right now. And I know you actually talked about including in the upcoming budget the 2 positions associated with the Inspector General's office. And I've said many times, and I'll continue to say, if we're going to do what it is that we're assigning people to do, especially new duties and responsibilities, that we need to make sure that we have in place the appropriate staffing to actually make that happen. I also noticed in the budget that there was a flexibility, I'll call it a flexibility fund for the chief of police. And I just want to say that I know based on a lot of data really across the state, as well as is reflected in our community, that recruitment for police officers can be, and probably is more than we even know, challenging to actually have people apply of the quality that we require in the city of Tallahassee. But in addition to recruitment and retention, we also, and I'm assuming that the $250,000, I think it was, for additional funds, that we will be listening to the community. They have ideas about what we can do in the community that really is not that costly. And I was fortunate to attend one of the meetings recently, and the ideas that the community had come up with really in the end was just not that expensive. So giving him flexibility to be able to be responsive to our communities, I think, is critical. I will say on the back end of that, as we progress through the various recommendations from our police department, that we too will be informed about what some of those things are that we actually covered through allocating funds for discretionary type initiatives. So I wanted to put that on the table because that's important, I think, not only to me, but to people that are in our communities. And then for the last thing I'll talk about is back in the back of our notebook, as you always provide us, the red, green, yellow, that's what I call it, quarterly update. And as I was going through that, I was just very excited, really, to see that most of the little rating, ratings are still green, which means we're still on the right track. We're on the right track because we're accommodating as we go, not because the money is as we projected, but based on actual revenue income for today. We have actually amended the things that we're doing in order to stay in the green arena. That is commendable. I wanted to bring that up and give commendations for really the entire city workforce, because it's them who actually make these things happen. We record it, but they make it happen. So hats off to all of them. And I think that probably concludes from my review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to commend the city manager and staff for the work that they've done. I think what this points to is all of the work that has gone into assuring the fiscal health of the city over the years. I know we put a lot of attention on fully funding our contingency fund. We've been aggressive at applying for state and federal grants and have been successful there. And so when we reached the times that we're in now in terms of the decrease in revenues, you know, we have had revenues in place to be able to accommodate some of the reductions in revenue that we've seen because of our efforts over the years. And so I want to also commend the city manager and his staff for the work that they've done in this regard. And I can tell you, our citizens have not seen one iota of a drop in the level or quality of services that has been provided by the city of Tallahassee. As a matter of fact, we've gone above and beyond when we've provided financial assistance to our local businesses and nonprofits, and even though it's not from the city revenue, but now making a commitment to those businesses modeled after what the city did in our Frenchtown Southside CRA district. So when you talk about tooting your own horn, I certainly think we ought to toot our own horn in that respect, because as Commissioner Williams-Cox mentioned, I don't know that there are many other, if any other cities in the state of Florida that are experiencing what we're experiencing, that have come out of this in as good a fiscal health as we have. And so again, Mr. City Manager, I commend you and your staff for the work that you've done in this regard, you know, based on, of course, the direction of the commission. I did want to follow up on the chiefs, and Mr. City Manager, you may want to have the chief respond to this. If you could talk to us about some of the initiatives that you anticipate out of this $250,000 discretionary fund that will be, and I assume it will be used exclusively for recruitment, or will it be used for other initiatives in the community, as Commissioner Bryant mentioned?
Chief, let me start. And actually, I think I would like the chief to share some thoughts, as well as our deputy city manager. Commissioner, thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. We very purposefully put this in the workshop material because while generally we're talking about reducing expenditures, we see a need to make sure we bolster our recruitment for many reasons. And what I want to say is what we've consistently said, which is part of our strategic initiatives, is that we're looking to make sure our workforce, in particular with police and all of our departments, reflect the diversity of our community.
Right.
That will make the strongest, the best department we can possibly have. The men and women at TPD, which I had an opportunity to go by and talk to several of them yesterday, they do an excellent job serving us. They're noble in their profession. They do an excellent job. But we all know that there's 40 fewer of them than we have budgeted for.
Yes.
And we know this year that 10 or 15 more will retire, just a normal cycle of retirement. And it is very challenging for the chief and his team to hire new recruits, especially in the environment we're in today. And we want to make sure that we recruit the best individuals possible. I was reminded today, and I'm going to call out a couple of our officers, Officer Hill, which if you watched Live PD at all, you would have seen his good work. He's a homegrown person. He's a homegrown kid that serves our community, and frankly, he is excellent. He has excellent interpersonal skills, and he does a great job for the city. We have Damon Miller. He's homegrown as well. He went to FAMU. Cynthia tells me he was a football player. I think he looks like one.
Yeah.
And so we're glad to have them. They are just two examples of the fine men and women we have in TPD. And the chief needs all the help he can get, financial and otherwise, to make sure we recruit those individuals, we retain them in our community, and we bring them into our community. And so this was something very thoughtful. And I'll be honest with you, if it turns out we need more money to recruit as the year goes on, sure, I'm going to bring that back to you and ask for more money, because I think this is one of the most important things we can do to have a good department. So that's just at the top. Cynthia might want to share some words about, how we develop those community relations too. And I'll defer to Cynthia, our deputy city manager, and Chief Revel, just to talk about how that all fits together. I mean, we could spend hours talking about this, and I think it would be well deserved, because it's so important to our future in our police department and really in our city. So I apologize. I've gone deep into your question, Commissioner, but I think it's a really important one. Yes. So, and Chief, I'll defer to you guys, because I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this too.
Thank you, City Manager. The City Manager hit on some important points related to recruitment. So this funding would not simply be used for the type of traditional recruitment efforts that we have in terms of signing bonuses and benefits to officers who come on, but how do you also spend time in the community and money and programming like our police youth athletic league, our youth academy, those kinds of activities where you work early to build relationships with young people who you can perhaps spur interest in law enforcement. And restore some of my thunder in terms of, we're very proud to have many members of the Tallahassee community who grew up here to become police officers. Some of the current models suggest that you need people who are from the area and from the community to have interest in police in their own communities. It helps with those relationships. Our chief is a homegrown member of this community, as well as Sterling Hollingsworth and a number of them. So this type of funding can be used in community programming and youth programming in particular, and with a very intentional focus on creating a force that looks like our community, that resembles our community, that represents the diversity of our community. We believe that will go a long way in strengthening those relationships and building a force that our entire community can feel a part of and proud of. So we're very excited about it. Like the city manager said, this may not be enough money, but we do believe it is an important area to focus on, and particularly in these times when it's so difficult to recruit talent in the police department. But let's start young, start building our own future force.
Okay.
Excellent. Commissioner Richardson? Chief?
I thought the chief.
Chief?
Hey, I do have to say, for clarification purposes, and I know he's probably not on this call, but just so you all understand, Damon was a punter, so he really wasn't a football player. He looks like one now, and you can please tell him that I said so. So
You're in trouble for that, Chief.
I know.
Yes, he is.
I know. No, we do have great people here, and you know, a lot of them are, you know, homegrown, which we are very proud of. But you know, the efforts that we're talking about here primarily deal with our marketing strategies and how we are going to promote the police department. You know, we do a decent job of getting out and being seen, but we need to do a much better job of marketing the department. And like the city manager and the deputy city manager said, a big part of that is starting much earlier. And some of the comments that we heard at the first bond meeting that Commissioner Bryant spoke to are some things like some hubs within the community where there are resource centers, where we have computers and we have, you know, job assistance programs there, and the police department needs to be in those type of things. So those type of initiatives are the things that we're talking about, and they are going to take, you know, some money to get things started. Obviously, you know, we're going to continue and to even enhance and expand our travel, especially where, you know, we are talking about HBCUs to military bases and to other places that have traditionally been fruitful in some recruiting efforts. But we have to enhance those, and we have to do that more, and we have to train our people to do that more, helping officers, you know, with the expense of moving new people that are willing to come, you know, from here. But like the deputy city manager touched on, for sure, you know, we are very excited about the opportunity to get back into even the elementary schools and to truly start much earlier. So, you know, whether that's a DARE type program that we had years ago, or some of the newer models that are out there now. Tempo, we are very excited that we currently have 3 positions that are available in our community service technician spots, and 2 applicants are in that process now. We hope to get a 3rd one from Dr. Thomas soon. But that specifically addresses the issue of, you know, recruiting in our own backyard and bringing in people that will facilitate that. So, you know, as we're looking at other things, we've talked previously about officer and residency type programs. Those are all the type of initiatives that we're looking at pushing forward. And we'll certainly be glad to come back as we expand Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and we expand PAL and how we do some of those other issues. But all of those are part of that marketing strategy, which is, you know, will encompass all of this.
Okay. And Mr. City Manager, as we go forward, as I think Commissioner Bryant requested as well, I'd like to get periodic reports of how we're doing in that regard. So when we go into future budget cycles, we can determine if this has been successful, if we do put more money into it, or if we might need to go in a different direction, just to give us a way of evaluating how successful these discretionary funds have been used to accomplish the goals that you've set out.
Yes, sir. We will make sure to do that. Thank you.
Okay. And I guess 2 other questions that I have. You know, we have made a commitment to having a minimum $12 an hour salary for all of our city employees. We made that commitment a few years ago. And so, Mr. City Manager, I just wanted to ask, where are we in terms of achieving that? Are all of our full-time city employees now at least at that $12 per hour wage?
Yes, sir, they are. Let me provide a little clarity too. That includes our full-time temporary employees as well. There are some seasonal temporary employees that don't earn $12 an hour, but those that are full-time temporary, full-time permanent employees, all earn a minimum of $12 an hour. We've achieved that. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then lastly, I know, you know, we've talked about where we're going, excuse me, with respect to recycling. That's important, very important to this community. And I know we'll have lots more discussion as we move forward with the fiscal year 21 budget. But can you talk to us about what your ideas for how we move forward with recycling in light of the fact that private enterprise is getting out of that venture?
Yeah, and that's a difficult area. It's a good question. And so you'll recall you and your colleagues gave us the authority and the direction earlier this year to make sure we could adequately fund recycling so that our community could continue to recycle. We've entered into what I'm going to call a bridge agreement with a local recycling processor where they collect the recycling and they make it ready for the market, and that's shipped across the southeast United States for ultimate recycling. We're doing that well, so I think we find ourselves in a safe place at the moment, but we know the economics of recycling are not good. I don't expect them to improve. We are in the midst of studying that to determine what our options are. They may very well be that the city, and maybe in partnership with the county, want to invest in a processing plant ourselves. But I think the future of recycling may be costly, but I believe it's a priority of the community, and you've signaled that in consistently. And right now, I think we're in a safe place, at least for the coming year and probably for the next couple of years as we identify more long-term opportunities.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, Mr. Mayor, I certainly want to highlight this because it's something that all of us can be proud of. As Robert mentioned, and the city manager, I think, may have mentioned it also, but, you know, we have committed to maintaining our millage rate at 4.1 mills. So what that means is, despite what the economic situation is for the city right now, we will not pass that economic burden on to our property taxpayers. We're going to live within our means and still provide services with that property tax rate at the 4.1 mills. I certainly want to highlight that because that's very important for property owners in our city to understand. We will not recommend a property tax increase at this time, despite the economic downturn that we're in. We're going to live within our means, but at the same time still provide quality services to the citizens of the city of Tallahassee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Matlow for comments.
Thank you. And I concur with that opinion, Commissioner Richardson. I do want to ask, sorry, I was having some technical difficulties getting on at the beginning of the call. But Robert, you mentioned kind of moving up the millage decision today. And I was just curious about the rationale for doing that now rather than when we adopt the budget in September.
Yeah, it's really predicated upon a schedule that's established. Notices have to go out in early August. Our next meeting is August 19th. In past years, in fact, we've voted on that millage decision in June with an additional meeting in July to prepare for that August notice. In this case, because of the pandemic, you know, we have the one meeting in July. Our next meeting is after the notice, the trim notifications have to go out. And so now is the appropriate time to be able to adopt that. Now that advertisement doesn't mean that at a later time, there aren't paths to go forward if we were to change it, but it's not our recommendation to change that 4.1 mills or the 1.0 for the Downtown Improvement Authority.
Okay, yeah. I support those rates. I just wanted clarification on that because I missed it earlier. A few things I do want to discuss are, and this may speak to future years of looking at going to more of a zero-based budgeting, but just having comparisons when we put things like employee raises on the table. Like, we recognize that's a sensitive subject to have, but we don't really have apples to apples to compare. If we weren't to go that direction, what would cuts look like? So I'm hesitant on that conversation, particularly because we're bringing up an inspector general later this evening, and we're funding that with more money to go and kind of, you know, keep watch on public employees at the same time as we may be cutting their pay. And I don't want our public employees to feel like, you know, they're under attack or we're slighting them. I recognize the budget shortfalls that we find ourselves in, but I think it would be helpful to just see what a 3% across the board, what that line item looks like completely. And then the other thing I would say is, I recognize we're not going to cut any employees, and there's value in that. Different sectors in the private sector are having to slash employees while others are having, the best years, depending on if they're in the supermarket industry, for example. But I think when we look at our lowest paid employees, when I say lowest, I mean like under the median income, under $15, $20 an hour. Well, if we put that on a line item, if you could send us, the people who are making $12 an hour, $13 an hour are real kind of frontline workers. If we broke them out separately to give them a raise and just realize that, as a city, we're committed to helping, the lowest paid among us do better. And when we're in better years, we do better all together. The general employees of the city of Tallahassee, I think, are at a real disadvantage because they're not unionized like we see in so many other cities to be able to stand up when these things come up. So I just think when it comes back, if we could just see what those numbers look like, just so we can make a rational decision, and if it doesn't fit into the budget, that's where we are. Thank you, Robert. The second thing I want to address is there's a national conversation really about policing, but also about human services and how the two intersect. And there's huge pushes for more investment in affordable housing, more investment in restorative justice practices, different types of responses to mental health crises, how we invest in rapid rehousing for the homeless. And I think these things are so intertwined with our law enforcement and law enforcement agencies, because in a lot of respects, we are asking them to fulfill some of these roles. The hashtag trended defund the police. We saw Ron Sachs did a survey that said 39% of the people support that at some level. But I think what everybody is supporting is, how do we do better by people? How do we reduce interactions that aren't necessary and really create public safety through investing in humans first? So I'd like us to dive deeper, because I respect what is being asked by the chief. I know that's a very difficult position to be in, but I think we need to marry kind of what our law enforcement needs with what our community needs. So when we push forward, we're not just saying, one thing, we're respecting the fact that so many of our law enforcement officers don't necessarily want to be the people who have to go run off the homeless population if they're on private property, or they don't want to be the person who shows up to a mental health disturbance. And when we think about zero-based budgeting with human services, we've never looked at our budget as, what does it cost to actually fulfill that service? How many interactions do we have with the mentally ill? How many interactions does law enforcement have with the homeless population? And getting that real data to say, if we wanted to do this a different way, we would need to bring in either a nonprofit or a public system that can address that directly. It's the broader conversation, but I don't want to march down this path to where, we have protesters and we have police, and it's us versus them, and our police officers are getting yelled at in the streets, and there's just this distrust, and it's like, that just can't continue. And I think to address that, it's up to us. It's the individual officers can't do it, the chief can't do it, the policy boards at cities and states really have to set the policy to push the investments in the places that the community wants. And the last thing I would just mention is, and I'm assuming it will come back in September, is our the capital improvement plan. Lots of big projects and priorities on there. Particularly interested in some of the airport infrastructure, the police station. I know we talked. I think we had $43 million previously budgeted for the police station. The facilities we were comparing it to in St. Pete cost like $80 or $90 million. I got a request this week to stop the police station altogether. So I think we need to just put that out to the public to show, where we're going, just for transparency in all aspects. And again, if we build facilities like that, how are we creating that parity? What are we doing for the community? What are we doing for human services and the people who are being affected the most at the same time? So we can really build unity as we move forward into the next year, recognizing we're in a budget, shortfall, and it's a hard time to bring up that conversation. But if we can't do it in the worst of times, we can't just put it off to the best of times. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll be coming back to you after my comments for a motion to wrap everything up, and we'll go from there. First of all, Reese and Robert, I want to thank you all for this workshop today. This is very difficult, as I had said earlier. You know, we're facing a $25 million deficit, but I actually agree with the Mayor Pro Tem in a very weird way. If you had told me a month and a half ago that we would only be looking at a $25 million deficit versus some of the other projections we were looking at, you know, we'll work with this and we'll move forward, and we will make it. I also want to thank every single city employee for the incredible job that they have been doing through these difficult times. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I'm so proud to work with the City of Tallahassee and everyone in their respective roles. I will go ahead and put out there that, yeah, I would be interested in a 2% cost of living adjustment if it was possible. I don't know if it's going to be possible, but I'm not going to lose hope until the very end as we continue through this process. But I do want to commend the city manager for making it a priority that everyone will maintain their job. We're not furloughing individuals. I mean, part of the stress that we've all been dealing with is the uncertainty. And I can only imagine, not only to the employees, but also to their families, knowing that you wake up and you have a job, a secure job, takes a lot of the burden off of our City of Tallahassee employees and their families. So, Reese, I want to commend you for holding firm and making sure that we take care of our employees. Chief Revel, I want you to know that I strongly back you and our Tallahassee Police Department. Chief Gaines, I want you to know that I strongly back you and our Tallahassee Fire Department. These have been interesting times over the past couple of weeks. I think we all realize we have a lot of work to do, both in law enforcement, both in public safety, but also just in general. A lot of my colleagues have brought up housing, for instance, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want you to know that I support the budget as it's proposed. Chief, I do support the additional funds that have been created. I do realize that we still need to hire in the police department, and I support your efforts. I also strongly support the overtime that's been put in the budget for law enforcement as well. And Reese, I commend you for working with our chiefs and making sure that we take care of our first responders, whether it's COVID, whether it's been some of the protests. We are now in hurricane season. We ask a lot of the Tallahassee Police Department. We ask a lot of the Tallahassee Fire Department, Utility Department. And I just want to make sure that our people know that I back them, I support them, and that we're going to move forward together. We're going to change together. I appreciate the chiefs being at the table as well, supporting change and being able to move together. But these are difficult times. But I'm glad what is being reflected in the budget as we move forward. I do want to get specific on one issue, Reese, and this is something that we've talked about. You know, affordable housing has been very much on our minds ever since we got elected. In particular, I was down at Leon Arms just the other day, you know, by myself, talking to the residents, trying to get a feel of what's going on. Mental health services is desperately needed now in our government housing assets. And we need to take action now. Now, in full disclosure, I am in a voluntary position as a member of the board at the Appalachia Center. So I am somewhat familiar with the services that are available. But Reese, as we talked about earlier, specifically when it comes to the CARES Act money that we will be receiving, traditionally, the city doesn't get in the game of physical health and mental health because by constitution, it's the county that's supposed to be the service delivery, but times have changed. And I am asking you to put together an emergency program that we can provide mental health services to our assets. Now, what does that look like just in general when it comes to dollars? You know, for about $100,000, we can have somebody that could rotate and be on site of our public housing facilities maybe once a week. On a Monday, it's at Orange Avenue. On a Tuesday, Leon Arms. On a Wednesday, it's at another facility. But not only do we need to think long-term with mental health services, specifically in our assets with Tallahassee Housing Authority, but we need to talk immediately. We still have a month and a half till students go back to school. And when I was down there, that was one of the first things that the residents spoke about is, hey, we just want to be able to talk to somebody. So Reese, I'm charging you to please put something together on a short-term emergency basis, but also long-term to bring back to the commission for consideration. And the only reason why I bring this up now versus at the meeting tonight, which I'll have other comments, is this is a budget issue. And so with that, I know we've had the opportunity to speak, Reese. I know how I feel about this, and I look forward to carrying on the conversation more so with my colleagues as well. But I cannot stress enough the importance of mental health services and physical health services, for that matter, on site at our assets here in Tallahassee now. With that, I am going to turn it over to
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yes, sir.
Do you mind if I weigh in on that? Because I'm going to ask you to give me some direction. I recognize, and you and I have talked about this, and I do believe, as you described it, even as you described it now, this is a COVID-related matter.
Correct.
Which I think gives us some fiscal leeway.
Correct.
But I'm going to need your approval, the majority of the commission's approval to move forward. And we are not going to have another meeting for some time. I think time may be of the essence. If you are comfortable, what would give me the proper authority is if the commission would provide the city manager authority to establish some kind of program. We need to work through that and spend up to $100,000 for the creation of a program that would be COVID related. I think we need to be very careful to keep this within the scope of COVID, because I think, as you have appropriately indicated, this normally is not within our charge. And it may be that after work with the county, we can create something jointly, but in order for me to move forward, I think I need your approval today. That would be very helpful to me to be able to create some structure and not get delayed based on our natural meeting schedule. I put that out there for your consideration.
Mr. Manager, I appreciate it. And of course, I want to hear comments from everyone. Mayor Pro Tem, I will be coming to you for the motion of not only the recommended action in our agenda, but also the recommended action that was just suggested by the city manager itself, specifically in regards to mental health services immediately in our housing facilities. Let me turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem for comment.
Okay, my question is to the attorney, is that something that we can do right now, since we did not notice it or advertise it as being a part of this meeting? Is that something we can do?
Well, I think, as was initially spoke about, we definitely have to make sure we don't cross the lines in terms of the responsibilities of the city and county. I certainly have not had an opportunity to look at that issue. I would just say that we need to remain cognizant of that. Certainly, there would be a needed, there has not been an opportunity for the public to comment on that action, because obviously they couldn't comment on an action that they didn't know was going to come up. So I certainly think the opportunity to comment is needed before an action is taken in that regard.
Okay, I wholeheartedly support and I understand where this is coming from, but I want to make sure that whatever we do, we're going to be legal with it, and we follow procedure. I know we need help now, but I also want to say this, that any mental health is not going to be good mental health. And the communities that you name, Mayor, the folks in my opinion who are going to need to go in there and provide that help has to be people that they trust and that they can receive help from. And given the population of those communities, it needs to be, in my opinion, people who look like the community, Leon Arms, and there are, in other words, we need Black therapists to go in there, and there are plenty of Black therapists here in our city. And some of them might do it on a voluntary basis, or may have a practice that they can provide these services with. And it just kind of depends. that we need to put a little structure to it and not just, send somebody down there today. We need to have some conversation, I think, and we definitely, like the attorney said, we want to make sure that we talk to our counterparts and do what we can to make sure that we're collaborating and not overstepping our bounds. I wholeheartedly agree with you that mental health is needed not only in those communities, but in our entire community, because all of us are being impacted by COVID. Because I think many of us on this line here could probably use mental health therapy every now and again. Here's mine, but others may have something stronger. But nevertheless, I understand and I feel what you're saying, and I agree. But we've got to make sure we're doing it right and that citizens, have an opportunity to weigh in.
I agree with that as well. I would still like for the motion to at least then include direction for the city manager to be able to speak with the county attorney and the county manager,
Absolutely,
the administrator, in regards to the CARES Act money that's coming down to bring us back the agenda item coming up at the September meeting. I think. Okay,
so that helps to frame what we're gonna do.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Richardson.
I have a mental health background. So does Commissioner Bryant. And I was on a Zoom call. I think it was Women Wednesday, and the young lady who was the speaker was talking about this very topic, the issue of mental health and providing mental health services. And Commissioner Williams-Cox, there is a dearth, actually, of African-American counselors and psychologists. I don't think we have an African-American psychiatrist in Tallahassee or even in this Big Bend area. So we would have a difficult problem there. Also, I don't know how much feedback you got, Mayor, in the visit that you made to Leon Arms, but there's also a stigma associated with mental health and mental illness in the African-American community. And if you talk about on-site services and people know are seeing who's going in that office or in that building, and they know what's happening in that building, I have to believe that you're not going to have many takers. So I think this is something that is absolutely needed. It's needed, as Commissioner Williams-Cox said, all over the community, especially during these times. I mean, we're seeing more youth suicides being reported than we ever have. These are stressful times. It's causing stress on families, on adults. Mental health services are being stretched. I have a friend of mine that's a clinical psychologist in private practice in Broward County, and he tells me how his caseload has increased. They're right now doing virtual teletherapy, and he tells me how his caseload has increased during these times. But this is something that we would need to move carefully on as we go forward. I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but I don't want us to rush into it and not do it right and maybe cause more problems than we're trying to address. I am comfortable with giving the city manager direction to speak with the county to look at this and see if it's something that we can explore, maybe in partnership with Appalachia or some of our other agencies that provide mental health services. But I don't want to see us rush into it and not do it right and maybe even cause more problems in what we're trying to correct.
Great comments. And by no means do I have all the answers of what the program would look like. But I did hear loud and clear they really, really, really are interested in mental health services. You do have a background, professional background. I don't, Curtis. And so I don't know what the program would look like. What was interesting in specifically talking about on-site services is that, we had a very detailed and long conversation about some of the hurdles with transportation. and that if you are going to, number one, it was surprising that a lot of people just didn't even know where to turn to. They didn't even know who to call to begin a conversation, let alone how to get there. Okay. And they're explaining the logistics of the day. If I have finally have an appointment, at noon across town to go see a doctor, that journey actually begins at, 9 o'clock this morning. And so it becomes a day affair. And so their point was services that were provided on site. The same thing for physical health. If there was a way to be able to have a checkup on site, it helps with the quality of life issue. But I hear you loud and clear, and I get it. And yeah, we want to do this right. I'm not the one. It's time to pass it off and let staff sit down and talk with the county about it. And it's interesting. And, on one hand, the county's in charge of health services. On the other hand, the city and the Tallahassee Housing Authority is in charge of public housing. So this is a prime opportunity for the two silos to mesh together, and we could put together a great program. So I hear you loud and clear, but let's start the conversation. Yeah. Dr. Bryant, Commissioner Matlow.
Commissioner Bryant.
I'll go back to the Mayor Pro Tem I'm sorry, Commissioner Matlow.
I'm sorry.
To Brian was muted.
Commissioner Bryant, are you?
No, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay, sure. I first off, Mr. Mayor, I just appreciate, this has been an issue that you brought up a few times on mental health needs in the community. I think you're absolutely right. I would love to, see how this comes back in September. I think there is a need for it. Would like to see where the money's going, who's providing the services, speak to some of those questions that have been asked by our other colleagues, but also recognizing that this isn't going to go away when COVID goes away, and we really need to find a more long-term solution or funding source to be able to provide these services. We know that you mentioned people don't have the transportation to go get help. We know there's people in our community that need medication, want medication, and can't have access to it. So as we tackle, that bigger issue, I appreciate you starting the conversation and look forward to seeing what comes back.
Well, I appreciate that too. And, Commissioner Matlow, there's so many issues that over the break, I intend to really start digging in and elevating the conversation. On one hand, we have the conversation of mental health and physical health, but mental health. On the other hand, we're talking about housing, quality housing. On the other hand, we're talking about those that are experiencing homelessness. And those are three issues all in itself that are intertwined with each other. And we got to have a better conversation in this community. And quite frankly, bring in the continuum of care that's dealing with homelessness issues. Bring in all providers for mental health services in our community. We need to have some frank conversations with the Tallahassee Housing Authority about exactly what's going on. From a facility standpoint, do you have laundry facilities on site? What do your playgrounds look like? What's the condition of your buildings? What are the renovations? We've had the conversation about moving forward of some of the new redevelopments that we want to do and some of the great things, but where are we right now? I think it's really kind of caught all of our attention, and we're all going through a personal journey along with, as members of this body, of we got to do more. We got to start pushing these conversations. Sometimes it might be a little uncomfortable, but I'm ready, like each one of you, to really dig in and do some amazing things in this community. And I think the community is hungry for it. So I appreciate your comments. Yeah. Dr. Bryant.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me say that I think we're on track with the urgency of needing to, not just in Leon Arms, and somebody probably needs to mute out, but really that the call is much broader. So as we attempt to plan for, and I think your issue is that if we're going to ask for COVID-19 funds, we need to be sure that we're asking for enough funds to go beyond one entity. So I think in this motion, it is critical that the city manager does some type of assessment of mental health needs, not just in Leon Arms, but really across the community. Because I'm very interested in areas where obviously there is a deficiency. And when I say deficiency, that the very things that you just talked about, whether it's mental health, it may be health, homelessness, and that list goes on. But if we're going to focus in and ask for COVID-19 funds to make sure that it fits that paradigm so that we'll know we can take care of this, and then we move on to other ways to actually collaborate in our community. And I'm going to continue to say that because other entities are actually, they have funding and it's not directed maybe to Leon Arms. Well, we need to be raising the flag such that all of us together can actually make a meaningful impact. So I am in agreement with Commissioner Williams-Cox and with Commissioner Richardson that we really should pay close attention to the plan for which we're going to ask funding such that it's a little bit more expansive than one place. And unfortunately, it does exist really all across the community. We probably won't be able to get funding for everybody everywhere. So let's focus in on the areas that has the most need. So I'm 100% in favor. I just want to say that mental health is in my background. So I know how important it is. Let's move forward. I don't want to get started like you just did, Mayor, but I'm about as excited as you are to actually figure out a plan to move forward.
Cool. Yeah, let me be clear, Dr. Bryant. I'm not talking about just one facility. I am talking about the big picture of mental health, but mental health in our housing facilities that we have, specifically through Tallahassee Housing Authority, and then any privately owned facilities that also receive Section 8. So I'm not talking about just one facility. I just want to make sure if I misspoke, I apologize.
No problem.
Cool.
Mayor, if I could.
Ms. Jackson.
Yes, I wanted to let you know that it does sound like there's some matters that need to be worked out, but under Chapter 286, if the official act must be taken to deal with an emergency situation affecting the public health, welfare, or safety, then compliance with 286 in terms of the notice requirements can be waived. So if that determination has been made that the emergency is of such a nature to require the waiver of the ability of the public to actually participate, that can be done under Florida law.
Appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem, I know you're making the motion. One thing to consider is we do have the budget meeting on August 19th. This is a budget item, at least asking the city manager to bring an update with his discussions with the county in regards to the CARES Act for the August 19th. That's a little sooner than the September 9th meeting. Again, my concern is between now and August 19th, trying to do our best to take care of this community. But great comments. I think we're all on the same page, and I think there's going to be some great programming that comes out of this. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll turn it back over to you for a motion.
Okay, we want to do the motion regarding mental health first or the budget first?
You have the floor.
Okay. In regards to the mental health, I make the motion that we authorize the city manager to work with the county administrator to bring back an update at the August meeting regarding the ability to provide mental health services to the named facilities that the mayor named, Leon Arms and many other Tallahassee Housing Authority, and any other interested party that may desire some mental health assistance.
Mm-hmm.
I'll second that.
Motion, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent.
Okay.
There's a great motion on the table by the Mayor Pro Tem asking for the update to come back based on discussions with the county. Any further comment on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, passes unanimously 5-0. Mayor Pro Tem, you have the floor for the budget motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, thank you for a great job this morning regarding the budget and where we are. I would offer the motion that we accept staff recommendation and option one as listed. You see it's being shared on the screen. accept the fiscal year 20 third quarter update, approve the requested budget amendments, authorizations, and grant awards for fiscal year 20, provide additional direction for development of the fiscal year 21 operating and fiscal year 21 through 25 capital budgets, and approve the following trim requirements as listed.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Second. Properly moved and second. Any further comment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Hey, I want to thank everybody. This was a great budget workshop. I want to thank my colleagues for the incredible conversation. We started off the day wonderful, and I will say,
I think we have one more motion, the trim notice.
Oh, the trim notice. You're absolutely correct. How dare I forget? Of course. Before we take the motion again, and Commissioner Richardson, I'll come to you for the trim notice. But I want you to know we've had a great morning, and we're going to have a great afternoon, and of course we'll come back at 3. Commissioner Richardson for the motion.
Robert, could you put the screen back up so I can make sure can you do your share screen, Robert? Okay. Mr. Mayor, I would move that we approve the following trim requirement: 4.10 tentative property tax rate for the city, 1.0 tentative property tax rate for the Downtown Improvement Authority, and set the 2 September public hearing dates.
Excellent. Second to the motion.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Bryant. One more time, Commissioner Matlow is our official representative on the Downtown Improvement Authority. You're comfortable with the millage property, the tentative property tax rate at 1.0 for the DIA?
Well, yeah, just on behalf of myself, yes, I am.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. City Manager, do we have anything else come before the board during the budget workshop?
No, sir, we do not.
Wonderful. We stand adjourned. See everybody at 3.
All right. Thank you, guys.
And,
Bye-bye.
and we can just turn off our mics and video.